"It's too big. Please stop," she whispered. As the mafia boss pulled her closer in the dark alley, the fluorescent lights of the emergency room hallway hummed with a sound that felt like it was drilling directly into the base of Olivia Harlow's skull. It was a low, electric buzz that only became audible when the chaos finally died down, leaving behind the sterile silence of the graveyard shift. Olivia peeled her latex gloves off with a snap, tossing them into the biohazard bin, and leaned heavily against the counter of the nurse's station. 12 hours. She'd been on her feet for 12 straight hours, dealing with everything from a cardiac arrest in Bay 4 to a drunken brawl in the waiting room that had required security intervention. Her lower back throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache, and the arches of her feet felt as though they had been bruised by the unforgiving linoleum floor. She rubbed her eyes, smearing a bit of mascara she had applied hopefully that morning, though the morning felt like a lifetime ago. Olivia checked the analog clock on the wall. It was nearly 2 a.m. Her shift had technically ended 45 minutes ago, but the paperwork never seemed to end, and neither did the need for overtime pay. She grabbed her tote bag from under the counter. The canvas strap frayed at the edge. It was heavy, weighed down not just by her water bottle and change of shoes, but by the stack of bills she had shoved inside during her lunch break, intending to call the utility company. She never made the call. There was never enough time. "Good night, Liv," the triage nurse called out softly, not looking up from her chart. "Good night, Sarah," Olivia replied, her voice raspy from disuse over the last quiet hour. "Get some rest if you can." She pushed through the double doors and stepped out into the cool, damp air of Grey Ridge. The city always smelled the same at this hour, like wet asphalt, old exhaust, and the faint, briny scent of the river that snaked through the industrial district. It was not a beautiful city, but it was home. It was the only place she could afford to live while paying off the crushing student loans that hovered over her head and trying to keep her younger brother, Noah, in college, so he would not end up working on the docks like their father had. Olivia pulled her thin cardigan tighter around her chest. The bus stop was 6 blocks away if she took the main road, which was well lit but agonizingly long when every step sent a jolt of pain up her shins. If she took the alley behind the hospital, the shortcut that sliced through the old brick tenements, she could cut the walking time in half. She hesitated at the corner. The street lamps on the main road were flickering, casting long, jumping shadows. It was late. She knew the rules of Grey Ridge. You did not walk alone in the dark, and you certainly did not walk through the Narrows, the network of alleys that ran like veins behind the business district. But the ache in her back made the decision for her. Just this once, she told herself. Just tonight. Because she was too tired to walk the long way, and because Noah needed tuition money, which meant she needed to be fresh for a double shift tomorrow. Olivia turned left, slipping into the mouth of the alley. The sounds of the city faded instantly, replaced by the echo of her rubber-soled shoes on the wet pavement. The alley was narrow, flanked by the high, windowless backs of warehouses and the hospital's loading dock. Steam rose from a vent somewhere above, curling into the misty air like a ghost. She kept her head down, walking briskly, her grip tight on her bag. She counted her steps to distract herself. 100, 101, 102. She was halfway through the corridor of brick when she heard it. Voices. They were not the slurred, wandering voices of the homeless men who sometimes sought shelter here. These were sharp, clipped, and dangerous. The tone was aggressive, vibrating with a tension that made the hair on Olivia's arms stand up. She stopped dead, her breath catching in her throat. Ahead of her, near the far exit where the alley widened into a service lot, 2 large black SUVs were parked at odd angles, effectively blocking the way out. The headlights were off, but the amber glow of the street lamp from the main road spilled enough light to illuminate the scene. 4 men stood in a loose semicircle. They were wearing suits, expensive ones that did not fit the grimy aesthetic of the Narrows. They looked like sharks in a murky pond. Facing them, standing alone near the bumper of the rear vehicle, was a 5th man. even from this distance, and in the poor light. He struck a terrifying silhouette. He was tall, significantly taller than the men confronting him, with broad shoulders encased in a long, dark wool coat that swirled around his legs in the wind. He did not look cornered. He looked like a king holding court in a slaughterhouse. "That is not acceptable," the tall man said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth and calm, carrying effortlessly down the brick tunnel to where Olivia stood frozen in the shadows. "I told Caldero the territory lines were drawn at 5th Street. You are standing on 4th. We go where we want." "Varlone," one of the men in the group spat back, stepping forward. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Varlone. The name hit her with the force of a physical blow. Everyone in Grey Ridge knew the name Dante Varlone. He was the shadow over the city, the man who owned half the police force and all the politicians. He was the monster parents warned their daughters about, the figure woven into urban legends of power and violence. She took a slow step backward, praying her shoe would not scrape against the grit. She needed to turn around. She needed to run back to the hospital, lock herself in the bathroom, and never take a shortcut again. But as she shifted her weight, her foot landed on a discarded glass bottle. It did not break, but it rolled with a distinct hollow clink that echoed sharply off the wet walls. The sound was not loud, but in the tense silence of the standoff, it sounded like a gunshot. Every head turned in her direction. For a second, time seemed to suspend itself. Olivia stood paralyzed, her eyes wide, staring down the barrel of 5 distinct gazes. Then, the man closest to the SUV reached inside his jacket. "We have a witness," he snarled, pulling out a handgun. The metal glinted dull and lethal in the amber light. "Take care of it," another man ordered. Terror, cold and absolute, washed over Olivia. She could not move. Her legs felt like they had turned to lead. She watched the man raise the weapon, her mind unable to process that she was about to die over a shortcut and a nurse's salary. But before the man could level the gun, the tall figure in the coat moved. Dante Varlone did not run. He exploded into motion with a terrifying grace. He was closer to her than the others, and he closed the distance between them in 3 long, powerful strides. Olivia gasped, flinching as a dark shape loomed over her. She expected violence. She expected a blow. Instead, a hand made of iron clamped around her wrist. "Move," he commanded, his voice a low growl right beside her ear. He yanked her sideways. Olivia stumbled, her feet tangling, but he did not let her fall. He dragged her with immense strength into a recessed doorway of an old loading bay, a shallow alcove shrouded in absolute darkness. The motion was so sudden and forceful that the air left her lungs. He spun her around and slammed her back against the cold, rough brick of the wall. Before she could scream, before she could even draw a breath to beg for her life, his body crashed against hers. He pressed her into the corner, effectively walling her in. He was massive. His chest was a solid wall of muscle against her softness, his hips pinning hers to the brick, his long coat falling around them like a curtain, shielding her from the view of the men in the alley. Olivia began to struggle, panic overriding logic. She twisted, trying to shove him away, but it was like trying to push back a falling building. "Quiet," he hissed. He brought his hand up, his leather glove cool and smooth, and covered her mouth. His palm was enormous, spanning from her chin to the bridge of her nose, silencing her whimpers instantly. The sensory overload was blinding. She was trapped between the freezing brick and the radiating heat of his body. He smelled of expensive tobacco, rain, and something sharp like gun oil. His other arm wrapped around her waist, locking her in place, his forearm a steel bar across her midsection. He was crushing her. The weight of him, the sheer size of him, was overwhelming. Olivia felt small, fragile, and completely at his mercy. Her chest heaved against his, her heart beating so fast she thought it might rupture. She tried to speak against his hand, her words muffled and broken. She wanted him to let go. She wanted space. The proximity was suffocating, too intimate, too terrifying. "It is too big," she managed to whisper against his palm, the words vibrating against his skin. "Please stop." She meant the situation. She meant his hand covering her entire face. She meant the way his massive frame eclipsed her world, blocking out the light, the air, and any avenue of escape. Dante went still. He did not step back, but he looked down at her, in the shadows. She could only see the glint of his eyes, dark and intelligent, scanning her face. He shifted his weight slightly, taking a fraction of the pressure off her chest, but he did not release her. "Shh," he murmured. The sound rumbled deep in his chest, vibrating directly against her ribs. "Do not move. Do not make a sound." Footsteps crunched on the gravel just a few feet away. "Where did they go?" a voice shouted. "Check the dumpsters." Olivia stopped breathing. The men with the guns were right there. If they found her, she was dead. She realized with a jolt of sickening clarity that the man pinning her to the wall was the only thing standing between her and a bullet. She went limp against the brick, ceasing her struggle. Dante seemed to sense her surrender. His thumb brushed lightly against her cheekbone, a strangely deliberate motion. Though his gaze remained fixed on the alley opening over her shoulder, his heart was beating against hers. It was slow, steady, boom, boom, boom. It was the heartbeat of a predator who was not afraid, only calculating. The footsteps lingered for an agonizing minute, then retreated. They ran back to the street. One of the men called out, "Let's go. We cannot risk the cops showing up." Car doors slammed. Engines roared to life, tires spinning on the wet pavement. Then silence returned to the alley. Heavy and suffocating, Dante did not move immediately. He held her there for another 10 seconds, ensuring the threat was truly gone. Olivia was trembling now, a fine, violent shaking that rattled through her bones. She was acutely aware of every point of contact between them. His hand on her face, his arm around her waist, his thighs pressing against hers, slowly, carefully. He lowered his hand from her mouth. He stepped back, creating a foot of space between them. The absence of his heat was immediate, leaving Olivia shivering in the damp air. She sucked in a desperate gulp of oxygen, her hands clutching the front of her scrub top. She looked up, finally seeing him clearly. He was devastatingly handsome, in a severe, brutal way. His jaw was sharp, covered in the shadow of a day's stubble. His hair was dark, slicked back from a high forehead, and his eyes were the color of obsidian, hard, reflective, and unreadable. He looked at her not with lust, but with a clinical, intense curiosity. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was no longer a growl, but it still carried that command, that expectation of obedience. Olivia blinked, her mind struggling to reboot. "No," she whispered. "I do not think so." "Good." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a silver cigarette case. He did not light one, just turned it over in his long fingers. "Why are you walking through the Narrows alone at 2 a.m, he asked, his tone shifting to something accusatory. "Do you have a death wish, or are you simply stupid?" The insult snapped Olivia out of her trance. The fear that had paralyzed her moments ago was suddenly replaced by a surge of adrenaline and indignation. She was a nurse. She saved lives. She worked herself to the bone. She did not need a criminal lecturing her on safety after he was the one who brought gunmen into her path. "I was trying to get home," she snapped, her voice gaining strength. "And I am not stupid. I am tired. I work for a living, unlike some people who apparently just stand around in alleys playing gangster." Dante paused. His eyebrows lifted slightly, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his features. He was clearly accustomed to people trembling, begging or fawning over him. He was not used to a woman in wrinkled scrubs glaring at him with righteous fury. "I just saved your life," he pointed out calmly. "You are the reason my life was in danger," Olivia countered, taking a step away from the wall, though her knees felt like water. "If you and your friends were not having a territory dispute in a public alley, I would be halfway to the bus stop by now." Dante studied her. His gaze dropped to her ID badge clipped to her collar, reading the name, Olivia Harlow. He read aloud, Gray Ridge Memorial, nursing staff. He looked back up at her eyes. She refused to look away, lifting her chin defiantly. "You have spirit." "Olivia," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching upward in something that might have been a smirk. "That is rare." Dangerous, but rare. He turned his head slightly and whistled, a sharp, piercing sound, from the shadows near the alley entrance. The single remaining SUV pulled forward, the engine purred, a beast waiting to spring. The window rolled down, revealing a thick-necked man with a shaved head. "Marco," Dante said. "Take Miss Harlow home." Olivia took a step back. "No, absolutely not. I am taking the bus." "The bus stopped running 10 minutes ago," Dante said. "And even if it was running, I am not letting you walk back out there. Those men saw your face. They know you saw them." Olivia felt a cold knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She had not thought of that. "You are a liability now." "Olivia," Dante said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious again, "which means you are my responsibility until I say otherwise. Get in the car." It was not a request. Olivia looked at the massive black car, then back at the dark, empty ends of the alley. She looked at Dante. He stood with his hands in his pockets, watching her with that unyielding intensity. There was violence in him. She knew that. She had felt the power in his hands when he pinned her. But there was also something else. A strange code. He had shielded her body with his own. She gripped her bag tighter. "Fine," she whispered, "but only because I want to go home." Dante opened the rear door for her. It was a gentlemanly gesture that felt jarringly out of place. As she climbed in, the scent of leather and his cologne enveloped her again, making her pulse skip. Dante did not get in. He leaned down, resting his arm on the roof of the car, looking in at her. "Lock your door when you get inside. Olivia," he said softly, "and do not take this shortcut again." He closed the door with a solid thud, sealing her inside the quiet luxury of the vehicle. Dante tapped the roof twice. "Take her to her door. Marco, wait until she is inside." The car began to move, gliding smoothly over the potholes that usually jarred Olivia's teeth when she took a taxi. She turned in her seat, looking out the tinted back window. Dante Varlone was standing alone in the middle of the alley, a dark sentinel amidst the steam and the shadows. He was watching the car drive away. He did not move until they turned the corner and he vanished from sight. Olivia faced forward. Letting out a breath she felt she had been holding for 20 minutes. Her hands were shaking in her lap. Marco, the driver, caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "You are lucky." Marco grunted. His voice was like gravel. "I do not feel lucky," Olivia muttered, rubbing her wrist where Dante's fingers had left a phantom sensation of heat. "The boss does not usually grab people," Marco said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he navigated the dark streets. "He usually just lets them deal with their own mess. If he touched you, it means he decided to keep you." "Keep me?" Olivia repeated, her voice rising in alarm. "I am not a stray cat." Marco chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "With Dante Varlone, there is not much difference. You belong to the breathless now, or you belong to the dead. Be glad it is the first one." The rest of the drive passed in silence. Olivia stared out the window as the familiar, run-down streets of her neighborhood rolled by. Every shadow looked like a man with a gun. Every parked car looked like a threat. When they pulled up to her apartment building, a 4-story brick walk-up with peeling paint, Marco kept the engine running. "Go on," he said. "I am watching." Olivia scrambled out of the car. Clutching her bag, she fumbled with her keys at the main door, her fingers clumsy. She finally managed to unlock it and practically threw herself inside the lobby. She ran up the 3 flights of stairs, ignoring the burning in her legs. She unlocked her apartment door, stepped inside, and slammed it shut. She threw the deadbolt. Then she fastened the chain. Then she grabbed a dining chair and wedged it under the doorknob. Only then did she collapse onto her worn-out sofa. Her apartment was quiet. The steady hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. It was safe. It was hers. But as she sat there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, she could not stop her mind from replaying the last hour. She could feel the cold brick against her back. She could feel the terrifying power of Dante's chest pressing against her. "It is too big. Please stop." She brought her hands up to her face, covering her mouth, mimicking the way he had held her. Her skin felt hot. She should be terrified. She was terrified. She'd seen men with guns. She had met a crime lord, But beneath the fear, buried deep in the pit of her stomach, was a traitorous ember of warmth. She remembered the way he had shielded her. She remembered the sound of his heartbeat, steady and strong, when she was sure she was about to die. She hated him for dragging her into this. But more than that, she hated herself for the shiver that ran down her spine when she remembered the feeling of his breath against her ear. Olivia Harlow closed her eyes, wishing she could scrub the memory of Dante Varloni from her mind, but knowing, with a sinking feeling of dread, that he was already etched there permanently. 3 days had passed since the incident in the alley, but for Olivia Harlow, the memory had not faded. It hung over her like the persistent, gray smog that choked the skyline of Grey Ridge. Every time she walked out of the hospital doors, her heart did a traitorous double beat, scanning the shadows for the tall, imposing silhouette of Dante Varlone. She told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself that men like him did not concern themselves with exhausted nurses who lived in walk-up apartments and drowned in student debt. But the city seemed to disagree. On the 4th night, the rain had returned, slicking the streets with a greasy sheen. Olivia exited the staff entrance, pulling her collar up against the biting wind. She stopped short. Across the street, idling in the no-parking zone that even the ambulances respected, sat the black SUV. It was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the fractured neon light of the pharmacy sign above it. Dante was there. He was leaning against the driver's side door, unbothered by the drizzle. He wore a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than her entire year's salary, the jacket unbuttoned to reveal a crisp white shirt. In his hand, a cigarette burned, a small cherry of orange light in the gloom. He was not looking at his phone. He was not looking at the traffic. He was looking directly at her. Their eyes met across the wet pavement, and the air between them seemed to snap with a sudden, electric charge. He did not smile. He simply watched her, taking a slow drag from his cigarette, his gaze heavy and assessing. It was the look of a man who was waiting for something that belonged to him. Olivia felt a flush of heat rise up her neck, a mix of fear and a humiliating, prickly awareness of her own appearance, her messy bun, her tired eyes, her shapeless scrubs. She stiffened, gripping her bag strap. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. She would not cross the street to ask him what he wanted. Instead, she turned sharply on her heel, marching toward the bus stop with aggressive strides, her rubber soles squeaking on the wet concrete. She refused to look back, but the sensation of his eyes on her retreating figure felt like a physical touch, burning right through her coat. The next shift was chaotic from the moment she clocked in. A multi-car pileup on the interstate had flooded the ER with trauma cases, turning the tiled floors into a slick, frantic battleground. Olivia moved on autopilot, starting IVs, shouting orders to orderlies, and trying to ignore the ache in her lower back that had become her constant companion. Around midnight, the double doors burst open. "GSW," yelled a paramedic, rushing a gurney through the entrance. Male, late 20s. Single shot to the abdomen, losing pressure fast. Olivia abandoned the chart she was updating and ran to assist. They swung the gurney into Trauma Bay 2. As she reached for the trauma shears to cut away the patient's blood-soaked shirt, the man on the table grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak, slippery with sweat and blood, but desperate. Olivia looked down. Recognition hit her like a bucket of ice water. It was him, the man from the alley. Not Dante, but the one who had snarled at Dante, the rival, the one who had reached for his gun before Dante had shoved her into the shadows. His face was pale, gray as ash, but she knew those eyes. "Please," the man rasped, his eyes rolling wildly in his head. "No cops! Do not call the cops! Sir, you've been shot!" Olivia said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "We have to report all gunshot wounds. It is the law." "No," the man tried to sit up, only to collapse back with a groan of agony. "If the cops come, the boss finds out. If the boss finds out I failed, he will kill me. Just let me bleed." He was terrified, not of dying from the bullet, but of something else. Before Olivia could respond, the atmosphere in the ER shifted. It was sudden and absolute. The frantic noise of the nurse's station, the ringing phones, the chatter, the squeak of shoes, dropped away into a hushed, suffocating silence. Olivia turned toward the main entrance. Dante Varlone walked through the sliding glass doors. He was flanked by two men, but they hung back, letting him lead. He moved through the hospital corridor not like a visitor, and certainly not like a worried relative. He moved like a landlord coming to inspect a property that had disappointed him. The security guard at the desk, a burly man who usually stopped everyone, suddenly found his paperwork very interesting, refusing to look up. Nurses and orderlies scattered, pressing themselves against the walls to clear a path. They knew who he was. In Grey Ridge, you learned the hierarchy early, or you did not last. Dante's eyes swept the room, cold and clinical, until they landed on Trauma Bay 2. On the man bleeding on the table. And on Olivia. He walked straight toward them. Olivia stepped away from the table, positioning herself directly in his path. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but anger, hot and bright, flared up, overriding her self-preservation. "You cannot be back here," she said. Her voice was loud in the sudden quiet of the room. "This is a sterile area." Dante stopped. He was close enough that she could smell the rain on his coat and the faint, sharp scent of expensive scotch. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "He is my employee," Dante said calmly, gesturing to the man on the table. "I am here to ensure he receives the best care. He has a bullet in his stomach because of people like you," Olivia snapped. A collective gasp went through the room. One of the nurses behind the desk put a hand over her mouth. No one spoke to Dante Varlone like that, not if they wanted to keep their tongue. Dante did not lash out. He did not signal his men to hurt her. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her with that same unnerving focus he had shown in the alley. "The city is a dangerous place." "Olivia," he said softly, "accidents happen." "This is not an accident," she countered, stepping closer, forcing him to look her in the eye. "This is violence. You bring your wars into my city, into my hospital, and you ruin lives. Look at him. He's terrified of you." Dante's gaze flicked to the man on the table, then back to her. His expression hardened, a mask of stone sliding into place. "I did not break this city, nurse," he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that only she could hear. "Grey Ridge was broken long before I was born. I just organized the pieces. You make it worse," she accused, her voice shaking now, not with fear but with exhaustion and frustration. "You prey on the weak." Dante looked at her then. Really looked at her. He saw the way her hands were trembling. He saw the smudges of exhaustion bruising the skin under her eyes, the dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. He saw the fraying threads on her scrub top. His gaze softened. It was a subtle shift, the tension around his eyes relaxing just a fraction. "You look exhausted," he observed. The sudden pivot in the conversation threw her off balance. "I am working," she said defensively. "You're running yourself into the ground," he corrected. "When was the last time you slept? Olivia, a full night? That is none of your business," she hissed. "Get out of my trauma bay." Dante held her gaze for a long moment, then he nodded. "Fix him up," he said, addressing the room at large but looking only at her. "Put it on my account. The hospital administrator knows the number." He turned and walked away, his coat billowing behind him. His men followed, silent ghosts in his wake. As soon as the doors slid shut behind him, the noise of the ER rushed back in, a vacuum refilled. Olivia leaned against the wall, her legs suddenly feeling like jelly. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her hands. She had just shouted at the most dangerous man in the city, and he had asked about her sleep schedule. The rest of the shift was a blur. When Olivia finally clocked out, it was 3 a.m. The rain had stopped, but the air remained thick and heavy. She walked out the back exit, the same one leading to the alley shortcut. She hesitated at the door. Her brain screamed at her to walk around, to take the long way, to call a cab she could not afford, but her feet were throbbing. Screaming in protest at the thought of the extra 6 blocks. "I will be fast," she whispered to herself. "I will just run through." She pushed the door open and stepped into the darkness. The alley was quiet, The puddles reflected the sickly yellow light of the distant street lamps. Olivia walked quickly, clutching her keys between her knuckles, a trick her father had taught her. She was halfway through when the shadows detached themselves from the wall. 3 men. They stumbled out from behind a dumpster, the distinct sour stench of cheap liquor rolling off them in waves. They were not cartel soldiers or mafia hitmen. They were just city drunks, mean and looking for trouble. "Hey there, nurse," one of them slurred, stepping into her path. "You look lonely." "Move," Olivia said sharply, trying to sidestep them. The man laughed, a wet, ugly sound. He grabbed her arm. His fingers were greasy and tight. "Do not be like that. We just want to talk. Maybe you can give us a checkup." "Let go of me," Olivia shouted, jerking her arm back. She managed to break his grip, but she stumbled. The second man moved behind her, blocking her retreat. The alley suddenly felt very small, very narrow. "Come on, sweetheart," the first man sneered, his face twisting into anger. "Do not be a bitch." He lunged for her. Olivia raised her hands to shove him back, but he was heavier than he looked. He slammed into her, shoving her hard against the brick wall. Her head cracked against the stone, bright stars exploding in her vision. The man pinned her there, his heavy, reeking breath in her face. "I said be nice," he growled. Then, the air in the alley changed. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees in a single second. "Get your hands off her!" The voice was not loud. It was not a shout. It was a shard of ice, sharp and lethal, cutting through the drunken haze of the attackers. The man pinning Olivia froze. He turned his head. Dante Varlone stepped out of the shadows at the mouth of the alley. He was alone this time. He did not need an entourage. He stood with his hands at his sides, his posture relaxed, but it was the relaxation of a coiled viper. The drunk man squinted, too inebriated to recognize the danger standing 10 feet away. "Who are you?" "Get lost." "Buddy, this is private." "I will not ask twice," Dante said. The drunk man laughed and pushed away from Olivia, turning to face Dante. He pulled a small knife from his pocket, the blade flashing in the dim light. "You want to be a hero? I will cut you." Dante did not flinch. He did not even blink. He took a step forward, his expensive leather shoes silent on the wet pavement. The drunk man lunged. It happened so fast, Olivia almost missed it. Dante sidestepped the clumsy thrust with effortless grace. He caught the man's wrist, twisted it with a sickening crunch, and drove his knee into the man's stomach. The knife clattered to the ground. The man folded, gasping for air, and Dante shoved him aside like a bag of trash. The other 2 men stared, their eyes wide. They looked at their fallen friend, then at the tall, dark figure who was now adjusting his cufflinks. "Run," Dante said. One word. Simple. Final. They ran. They scrambled over each other to get out of the alley, leaving their friend groaning in a puddle. Silence returned. Olivia stood pressed against the wall, her chest heaving. She was shaking violently now, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. She slid down a few inches, her knees threatening to give out. Dante turned to her. The violence in his face vanished, replaced by a look of intense concern. He closed the distance between them instantly. "Olivia," he said. He stopped just in front of her. He did not grab her this time. He did not pin her. He positioned his body between her and the open alley, shielding her from the world. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. I am okay," she stammered, though her voice sounded thin and foreign to her own ears. He shoved me." Dante's jaw clenched. A muscle feathered in his cheek. He looked down at the man groaning on the ground, a flash of pure, cold malice crossing his eyes. Before he turned his attention fully back to her, he reached out, his hand hovering near her elbow, waiting for permission. When she did not recoil, he gently took her arm, supporting her weight. "Easy," he murmured. "You are shaking." He guided her to lean more comfortably against the brick, his body creating a warm, solid barrier against the cold wind. He was close, so close that she could feel the heat radiating from him. He looked her over, checking for injuries. His eyes scanned her face, lingering on the spot where her head had hit the wall. "Let me see," he said softly. He reached up. His hand hesitated near her temple. His fingers were mere inches from her skin. He was asking, not taking. Olivia nodded, a jerky, small movement. Dante's fingers brushed her hair back. His touch was shockingly gentle, for a man who had just broken a wrist without blinking. His hands were tender. His thumb grazed her skin, checking for a bump. "You are going to have a bruise," he said quietly. Olivia felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. She bit her lip, fighting them back. She was embarrassed. She was a strong woman. She dealt with trauma every day. But standing here, in the dark, with this dangerous man treating her like something precious, she felt her defenses crumbling. "I am fine," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You are not fine," Dante corrected gently. "You are terrified." He lowered his hand, but he did not pull away. His hand drifted down, hovering near her hip, not quite touching her waist, but close enough that she could feel the intent. It was a protective stance, possessive. "Why were you here?" she asked, looking up at him. Her eyes were wide, searching his face. "You were following me again." Dante did not deny it. He did not look away. "I was keeping an eye on you," he admitted. "Why? Because you saw too much," he said, reciting the excuse like a prepared line. "No," Olivia said, shaking her head. "That is not it. You could have sent Marco. You could have sent anyone. Why are you here?" Dante stared at her. The silence stretched, heavy and thick with unspoken things. He looked at her mouth, then back up to her eyes. He seemed to be fighting a war within himself. "I do not like innocent people getting caught in the crossfire," he said finally. It was a lie, or at least only half the truth. Olivia felt a strange twisting in her stomach. It was fear. Yes, but beneath it was that same treacherous warmth she had felt the first night. She felt safe, standing inches away from a mafia boss in a dark alley. She felt safer than she had all week. He stepped back slightly, giving her room to breathe, but his eyes never left hers. He reached out and brushed his thumb against her forearm, over the fabric of her scrub top. It was a small contact, barely anything, but it sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core. "Come on," he said, his voice rougher now. "My car's at the end of the block. I am driving you home. And this time—" "Olivia, you are not arguing with me." Olivia looked at him. She looked at the man on the ground. She looked at the dark alley. She did not argue. She walked beside him, letting him guide her out of the shadows. And as they walked, she realized with a sinking heart that the danger to her life was nothing compared to the danger to her heart. She was beginning to want him to look at her. She was beginning to want the monster to stay. The knocking on the door was not the polite rap of a neighbor or the rhythmic thud of a delivery driver. It was frantic, desperate, a chaotic hammering that made the cheap wood frame rattle in its setting. Olivia Harlow dropped her book, her heart leaping into her throat. It was barely 8 in the evening, but in her neighborhood, unexpected visitors were rarely good news. She moved to the door, checking the peephole, and let out a sharp breath of relief that instantly soured into worry. It was Noah. She undid the chain and threw the bolt before she could even fully open the door. Her younger brother stumbled inside. He looked like a wreck. His hair was matted with sweat despite the chill outside. His eyes were bloodshot and wide with terror, and he smelled of stale beer and fear. "Noah?" Olivia asked, grabbing his shoulders to steady him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Noah shook his head violently, pulling away from her to pace the small length of her living room. He looked like a trapped animal, vibrating with nervous energy. "I messed up. Liv," he choked out, his voice cracking. "I messed up bad this time. I thought I could double it. I thought I had a sure thing." Olivia felt a cold stone settle in her stomach. She knew about Noah's gambling habits. Small things, usually a $50 bet on a football game, a poker night with his college friends. But this looked different. This looked like ruin. "How much?" she asked, her voice steadying into the clinical tone she used in the trauma bay. Noah stopped pacing. He looked at her, tears streaming down his flushed face. $20,000, he whispered. The air left the room. Olivia stared at him, unable to comprehend the number. $20,000 was an insurmountable mountain. It was more than she made in months. It was a lifetime of debt. "Who?" she demanded. "Who do you owe?" "There is a guy," Noah stammered, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "They call him Snake. He runs the back room at that pool hall on 4th. He said if I do not pay by tomorrow night, he is going to break my legs, and if I still do not pay—" He trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the silence. Olivia grabbed his arm again, forcing him to look at her. "Who does he work for? Noah? A loan shark with that kind of money does not work alone." Noah swallowed hard. "He says he kicks up to the Caldero family." The name hit Olivia like a physical slap. Caldero, the rival faction. The men who had been in the alley that night. The men who had shot the patient in her ER. She released Noah and stepped back, her mind racing. The police were useless here. Half of them were on a payroll, and the other half would just arrest Noah for illegal gambling while the shark walked free. She could not get a loan that size. She had nothing to sell. There was only one option. It made her sick to her stomach. It went against every moral fiber she had stitched together to keep herself decent in a corrupt city. But looking at her little brother, the boy she had practically raised after their mom died, she knew she would burn her soul to keep him safe. "Stay here," Olivia ordered, grabbing her coat and purse. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "Where are you going?" Noah asked, panic rising in his voice. "Liv, you cannot go to the police." "I am not going to the police," she said, her hand on the doorknob. She did not tell him where she was going. She could not admit it out loud. The restaurant was called La Dolce Vita. It sat in the heart of the affluent downtown district, a world away from Olivia's crumbling apartment block. Valets in red vests were parking Maseratis and Porsches. The windows were draped in velvet, glowing with the warm, golden light of chandeliers. It was an open secret in Grey Ridge that Dante Varlone owned the place. It was his court, his throne room disguised as a 5-star establishment. Olivia smoothed down her coat. It was old, the wool pilling at the cuffs, and she wore her work shoes because she had not had time to change. She looked completely out of place among the women in silk dresses and the men in tailored suits entering the heavy oak doors. She walked up the steps, her chin held high. The maitre d' was a tall man with a thin mustache and eyes that dismissed her instantly. He stepped in her path as she entered the foyer, a wall of polished antagonism. "I am afraid we are fully booked this evening, miss," he said, his tone dripping with false politeness. "And the kitchen is closed for takeout orders." "I am not here to eat," Olivia said. "I need to see Dante Varlone." The man's eyebrows rose. He looked her up and down, a sneer curling his lip. "Mister? Varlone does not see visitors, especially not walk-ins. Please leave before I call security. Tell him Olivia Harlow is here," she said, her voice trembling slightly but loud enough to be heard over the soft jazz playing inside. "Tell him it is about the alley." The maitre d' hesitated. The name clearly meant nothing to him, but the mention of the alley seemed to trigger a flicker of uncertainty. He signaled to a large man in a dark suit standing by the coat check. "Security." "Wait here," the security guard grunted. He disappeared into the back. Olivia stood by the door, enduring the judgmental stares of passing diners. She felt small, cheap, and terrified. She was standing in the lion's den, demanding an audience with the beast. 2 minutes later, the guard returned. His demeanor had changed completely. He was no longer dismissive. He was alert, respectful. "Follow me, Miss Harlow." He led her through the dining room, past tables of laughing, wealthy patrons who had no idea their wine was poured by a criminal empire. They went through the kitchen, a pristine, chaotic world of shouting chefs and clattering pans, and stopped at a heavy steel door at the very back. The guard knocked once, then opened it. The office was quiet. It smelled of leather, old books, and expensive cigar smoke. The walls were lined with dark mahogany shelves. In the center of the room, behind a massive desk that looked like a fortress, sat Dante Varlone. He was reviewing a stack of documents, a glass of amber liquid near his hand. He looked up as she entered. He was not wearing his coat tonight. He was in a black dress shirt, the top buttons undone, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing thick, corded muscles. He looked dangerous, powerful, and undeniably surprised. "Leave us," Dante commanded the guard. The door clicked shut, leaving them alone in the silence. Dante stood up slowly. He moved around the desk, leaning against the front of it, crossing his ankles. He studied her face, his dark eyes sweeping over her anxious expression, her clenched fists, her cheap coat. "Olivia," he said. His voice was low, rolling through the room like distant thunder. "I did not expect to see you here. You usually run in the opposite direction when you see me." "I need help," Olivia blurted out. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Dante's expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "I assumed as much," he said. "You are not the type to come for a social call. What happened?" "It is my brother," she said. "Noah, he is in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "Gambling debt," she explained, the words rushing out now that the dam had broken. "He owes $20,000. He has until tomorrow night. The man said he would break his legs." Dante took a sip of his drink, his face impassive. $20,000 is a lot of money for a college kid, but people make mistakes. Why come to me? Why not the bank? Because the man he owes works for the Caldero family? She said. The reaction was instantaneous. Dante went still. The relaxed posture vanished. He set his glass down on the desk with a sharp clack. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. "Caldero," Dante repeated. The name came out as a curse. "Yes," she whispered. Dante pushed off the desk and began to pace the small room, his movements agitated. "A loan shark tied to Caldero is squeezing your brother." "Yes." "They are touching my city," Dante muttered, more to himself than to her. He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration radiating off him in waves. "And they are squeezing someone connected to me." "I am not connected to you," Olivia protested weakly. "You are the only reason I have not burned down half the city yet," Dante snapped, turning to face her. The intensity of his gaze made her take a step back. "You think this is a coincidence?" he asked, his voice rising. "Caldero knows I watched you. He knows I stepped in for you. He is targeting your brother to get a reaction out of me, or to punish you for being under my protection." "I never asked for your protection," Olivia cried out. "You have it anyway," Dante roared back. The silence that followed was ringing. They stood 10 feet apart, breathing heavy, the tension between them thick enough to choke on. Olivia felt tears stinging her eyes. It was too much. The fear for Noah, the exhaustion from work, the shame of begging, and now this overwhelming, suffocating force that was Dante Varlone. "I hate this," she said, her voice shaking. "I hate that I have to be here. I hate that men like you run this city. I hate that I have to beg a criminal to save my brother from other criminals. It is not fair." "Fair?" Dante scoffed. He walked toward her, closing the distance until he was towering over her. "You think the world is fair? Olivia? You work in an ER. You see children die of cancer and drunks walk away from car crashes. There is no fair. There is only power. And right now, you are here because I have it, and you do not." The cruelty of the truth cut her deep. "I know," she whispered, the fight draining out of her. "I know I am powerless. That is why I am here." She looked down, unable to meet his eyes, humiliated. "I feel trapped," she confessed, her voice breaking, "by the debt, by the hospital, by you. Everywhere I turn, there is just darkness." A tear escaped, tracking a hot line down her cold cheek, then another. Dante stood in front of her. He did not speak. She expected him to mock her, or to dismiss her, or to demand payment. Instead, she saw his shoes move closer. "Olivia." His voice was different. The anger was gone, replaced by something rougher, deeper. She did not look up. She could not. Dante's hand came up. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his fingers hovering in the air, before he gently cupped her cheek. His palm was warm, his skin rough with calluses, the hands of a man who worked, who fought. His thumb brushed over her cheekbone, wiping away the tear that had fallen. "Look at me," he commanded softly. Olivia lifted her eyes. Dante was looking at her with an expression that terrified her more than his anger. It was raw. It was open. The walls he usually kept up, the coldness, the arrogance, had cracked. Beneath them, she saw a man who was just as trapped as she was, but in a cage of his own making. "You are not powerless," he murmured, his thumb stroking her skin again, sending shivers down her spine. "You are the only thing in this city that is real. You walked into the devil's house to save your family. That is not weakness. That is strength." Olivia's breath hitched. His face was inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark irises. She could smell the scent of him. Sandalwood, scotch, and man. He leaned in. The air between them seemed to vibrate. Olivia knew she should pull away. She knew he was dangerous. She knew this was wrong, but her body betrayed her. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, and her feet stayed rooted to the spot. She watched his eyes flick down to her lips, then back up to hers. A silent question, a silent plea. Her chest lifted with a shaky inhale. She did not say no. She did not step back. Dante closed the gap. When his lips touched hers, it was not the violent collision she might have expected from a man of violence. It was slow. It was heavy. It was a kiss of restrained hunger, as if he had been starving for a lifetime and was afraid that if he took too much, she would vanish. Olivia gasped softly against his mouth, and he took that as an invitation. The kiss deepened. His hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, his fingers threading into her hair, gripping her gently but firmly, angling her head to deepen the contact. It was possessive, demanding yet careful. Olivia's hands, acting on their own accord, reached up and clutched the front of his shirt. The fabric was crisp under her fingers. She could feel the heat of his chest radiating through the cotton, the solid, unyielding strength of him. He groaned low in his throat, a sound of pure need that made her knees weak. His other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. She collided with his body, feeling the hard lines of his torso, the power in his frame. He felt like a fortress. He felt like safety. For the first time in weeks, the crushing weight of her life seemed to lift, replaced by the encompassing reality of him. He surrounded her. He was everywhere. His taste, his scent, his touch. The kiss became more urgent, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, tasting her, claiming her. It was a boundary-pushing intimacy, charged with all the unspoken anger and fear and desire that had been building since that night in the alley. Olivia pressed closer, seeking the support of his body because her own legs could no longer hold her. She felt like she was drowning, but for the first time, she did not want to be saved. She wanted to sink. Dante's hand at her waist tightened, pulling her hips against his, but he did not trap her. He left a fraction of space, a silent signal that she could leave if she wanted to. She did not want to, not yet. For a long, suspended moment, the world outside the office ceased to exist. There was no debt, no hospital, no rival gangs. There was only the friction of his lips, the roughness of his hands, and the fire in her blood. But then, reality crashed back in. The realization of what she was doing hit her. She was kissing a mafia boss. She was kissing the man who represented everything she stood against. Olivia pulled back, breaking the kiss with a sharp gasp. She stumbled a step away from him, her hand flying to her mouth. Her lips felt swollen, tingling with the ghost of his touch. Her face was burning. Dante did not chase her. He stood where she left him, his chest heaving slightly, his eyes dark and blown wide with desire. He looked wrecked, his composure shattered. Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. "I cannot." She looked at him, panic rising in her chest. "This cannot happen again," she said, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "I came here for Noah, only for Noah." Dante watched her. He ran a hand over his mouth, as if wiping away the taste of her, or perhaps trying to keep it there. He took a deep, steadying breath, his mask slowly sliding back into place, though his eyes remained turbulent. "I know," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel. He walked back to his desk, putting the physical barrier of the wood between them again. He picked up his glass, but his hand was gripping it so tight his knuckles were white. "Go home, Olivia," he said, not looking at her. "Lock your door." "What about Noah?" she asked, her voice small. Dante looked at her then. The desire was still there, burning low, but the cold, calculating look of the Don had returned. "Consider the debt paid," he said. "Your brother is safe, but do me a favor." "Anything," she said instinctively. "Stay out of Caldero territory," Dante said grimly, "because after tonight, I am going to make sure there is nothing left of it." Olivia nodded, unable to speak. She turned and fled the room, the heavy steel door clicking shut behind her. She walked through the kitchen, through the dining room, and out into the cool night air. She did not stop until she was blocks away, waiting for the bus. She touched her lips again. 2 hours later, Noah received a text message. He stared at his phone, his face pale. "It is gone," he whispered to Olivia, who was sitting on the couch with a cup of tea she had not touched. "The debt? Snake just texted me. He said the account is settled and that he is leaving town." He looked at his sister with wide, grateful eyes. "Liv, what did you do? How did you fix this?" "I asked for a favor," Olivia said quietly, staring into the dark liquid in her mug. The next morning, the news reported a fire at a pool hall on 4th Street. The police suspected arson. There were no casualties, but the message was clear to anyone who knew the language of the streets. Dante had escalated the war. Olivia sat in the hospital break room, watching the news report on the small TV. She knew she should be horrified. She knew she should be disgusted that a building had burned because of her. But as she wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, all she could feel was the phantom sensation of Dante's thumb on her cheek, and the terrifying realization that for one brief, stolen moment, she had felt like the center of his violent, burning world. The city of Grey Ridge felt like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. The air was thick with humidity and the metallic taste of ozone, a storm perpetually threatening to break, but never quite delivering relief. For the past week, the headlines of the Grey Ridge Gazette had been dominated by euphemisms. They called it a surge in gang-related activity. They called it an uptick in urban violence. Olivia Harlow knew exactly what it was. It was a war. Inside the sterile white walls of the emergency room, the reality of that war was dragged in on gurneys every night. Business was booming for the trauma surgeons. Olivia had treated 3 stab wounds, 2 blunt force traumas, and a shattered orbital socket in the last 48 hours alone. Every time the ambulance bay doors hissed open, her heart stuttered. She scanned the bloody faces of the men being wheeled in, looking for the sharp features and obsidian eyes of Dante Varlone. She told herself she was looking for him because she wanted to know if the source of all this chaos had finally been stopped. But deep down, in the quiet, terrified corners of her mind, she knew she was looking because she was terrified that he had been hurt. Is it just me? Or is the Varlone syndicate tearing the city apart? One of the younger residents whispered to Olivia as they scrubbed up after stitching a nasty laceration on a bouncer's arm. "It is a turf war," Olivia said, her voice tight as she dried her hands. "Someone is pushing them." "Well, I wish they would push somewhere else," the resident muttered. "I am tired of patching up thugs." Olivia did not reply. She looked at the clock. Her shift was over, but the dread did not leave her when she changed out of her scrubs. It followed her out the door, across town, in the back office of a logistics warehouse that smelled of diesel and dust. Dante Varlone stared at a map of the city spread across his desk. Red markers indicated Varlone businesses that had been hit: a bar on 5th, a laundromat on Main, a shipping container at the docks. Caldero was getting bold. He was striking fast and hard, trying to provoke a reckless response. Dante rubbed his temples, fighting off a headache that had been building for days. He had not slept more than 3 hours a night since the incident with Noah. Boss. Dante looked up. Luca, his second in command, stood in the doorway. Luca was a man who usually blended into the woodwork, efficient and silent, but lately he seemed jagged. His suit was rumpled, and his eyes darted around the room with a nervous energy that Dante found irritating. "What is it?" "Luca?" Dante asked, his voice rough. "The shipment from the coast is delayed again," Luca said, stepping into the room. "And the guys, they are getting restless. They want to know when we are going to hit back. They want to know about the bonuses for the extra security shifts. Dante frowned. I told you yesterday. The bonuses will be paid when the heat dies down. We need liquid cash right now to cover the losses from the warehouse fire. Luca licked his lips. Yeah, sure. But people have bills. Dante, loyalty is expensive. Dante narrowed his eyes. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. Since when do you worry about the payroll, Luca? You have been with me for 10 years. You know the money is always good. It is just... Things are different now, Luca said, avoiding Dante's gaze. You are distracted. You are spending resources on things that do not bring in profit. Dante knew exactly what Luca was referring to. He was referring to the 24-hour surveillance team Dante had placed around a certain apartment building in the residential district. He was referring to the war Dante had started over a nurse. Watch your tone, Dante said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I run this family. You follow orders. Is that clear? Luca stiffened. Crystal, boss, get out and tell the men to be ready. We strike back tonight. Luca nodded and turned to leave. Dante watched him go, a flicker of unease settling in his gut. Luca was acting strange, evasive, greedy. In the old days, Dante would have dug into it. He would have followed him. But right now, his mind was consumed by two things, destroying Caldero and keeping Olivia Harlow alive. He picked up his phone. There was a text from the lead sentry watching Olivia's block. Target is home. Safe. Dante stared at the screen for a long time before setting it face down. Safe was not enough. Olivia was trying to create distance. She was trying to pretend that her life had not been fundamentally altered by a man in a dark coat. She picked up extra shifts. She avoided the alley. She stopped watching the news. But Dante Varlone refused to let her forget him. It started with the hospital. On Tuesday morning, the chief of medicine called an emergency staff meeting, beaming like a child on Christmas. He announced that an anonymous donor had just wired enough funds to renovate the entire pediatric wing and purchase 2 state-of-the-art MRI machines. The donor had asked for no plaque, no recognition, only that the donation be listed under the Varlone Foundation. The staff cheered. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. She knew exactly who had sent the money. It was an apology. It was a bribe. It was a message saying, I am watching you work. Then came the apartment. 2 days later, Olivia came home from a double shift to find a van marked Metro Security Solutions parked outside her building. Men in blue coveralls were installing high-definition cameras above the main entrance and in the stairwell. Inside, she found a locksmith kneeling in front of her own apartment door. Excuse me, she exclaimed, dropping her bag. What are you doing? The man looked up, holding a heavy-duty deadbolt. Just finishing up. Ma'am, landlord ordered an upgrade. Said the old locks were a safety hazard. Olivia looked at the lock. It was solid steel. The kind used on bank vaults, not walk-up apartments. Did the landlord order this? She asked sharply. Or was it a man named Dante? The locksmith shrugged, avoiding her eyes. The order form just said priority installation. Here are your new keys. He handed her 3 heavy brass keys and packed up his tools quickly. Leaving Olivia standing in the hallway, she gripped the cold metal in her palm. He was fortifying her. He was turning her life into a fortress without even asking for her permission. She wanted to be furious. She wanted to scream at him for his arrogance, for his intrusion. But as she slid the key into the lock and felt the solid, reassuring thunk of the bolt sliding home, the anger was dulled by a shameful, overwhelming sense of relief. That evening, the tension finally snapped. Olivia was in her kitchen, heating up soup, when a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. It was not Noah. Noah had his own key now. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Dante. He looked terrible. He was still handsome. Painfully so. But the exhaustion was etched deep into the lines of his face. His coat was damp from the rain, and his hair was slightly disheveled. Olivia undid the deadbolt, his deadbolt, and opened the door. What are you doing here? She asked, blocking the entrance. You cannot just show up here. Dante, may I come in? He asked. No, she said, crossing her arms. You put cameras in my hallway. You put a lock on my door. You bought my hospital a new wing. What is next? Are you going to buy the building and evict my neighbors?" "There was a shooting 2 blocks over," Dante said. He did not raise his voice, but the words cut through her anger like a knife. Olivia froze. "What?" "Half an hour ago," Dante continued, "a drive-by. No one was hit, but it was close. Too close to you." He stepped forward. Olivia instinctively stepped back, and he was inside before she could stop him. He shut the door behind him and locked it, testing the handle to make sure it held. "I needed to see that you were all right," he said, turning to face her. "I am fine," Olivia said, her voice shaking. "I did not even hear it." "You would not have heard it," he said grimly. "They used suppressors, which means it was professional, which means it was Caldero sending a message to me." He walked into her small living room, his presence instantly filling the space. He looked out of place among her thrift store furniture and the pile of nursing textbooks on the coffee table. He looked like a wolf in a rabbit's den. "You have to leave," Olivia said, following him. "If they are targeting you, then being here puts me in more danger. I am the only thing standing between you and them." Dante shot back, spinning around. "Do you think they care if I am here or not? They know who you are. Olivia, they know I cleared your brother's debt. I never asked you to clear it," Olivia shouted, the frustration of the last week boiling over. "I asked for help, not for you to start a war. The war was already started," Dante said, his voice rising to match hers. "You just gave me a reason to fight it harder." "I do not want to be your reason," Olivia cried. "I do not want to be part of your world. I just want to go to work and come home and not wonder if there is a sniper on the roof across the street." Dante stopped. He looked at her, his chest heaving. "Then tell me to go," he said quietly. "Tell me to walk out that door and never come back. Tell me you do not care what happens to me." Olivia opened her mouth to say the words. They were right there on the tip of her tongue. "Go. Leave me alone." But she looked at him. She saw the dark circles under his eyes. She saw the way his hand was clenching and unclenching at his side. She saw the desperation of a man who was drowning and looking at her like she was the only shore in sight. "I can't," she whispered. The truth hung in the air between them, fragile and terrifying. Dante stared at her. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Because I am scared," she admitted, her voice wavering. "I am scared of you. But I am more scared that one night a gurney is going to come through those doors and it is going to be you on it. And I cannot keep pretending that I would be okay with that." Dante let out a breath that sounded like a pained groan. He moved toward her. It was not the predatory advance of the alley. It was a gravitational pull. He stopped inches from her. The air in the room seemed to vanish, replaced by the electric charge of his proximity. Olivia looked up at him. His eyes were searching hers, looking for permission, looking for rejection, looking for anything. He reached out. His hand trembled slightly, a vulnerability that shattered her heart as he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered there, warm and rough, before trailing down the line of her jaw. He cupped her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her bottom lip. "You should hate me," he murmured. "It would be safer for you if you hated me." "I know," she whispered. But she did not hate him. God help her. She did not hate him. Her resistance, which had been a crumbling wall for weeks, finally collapsed. Olivia stepped forward. She placed her hands flat against his chest, beneath the fine cotton of his shirt. She could feel his heart beating, hard, fast, steady. It was the rhythm of a survivor. She tilted her face up. She saw the surprise flare in his eyes, followed immediately by a darkening heat. She did not wait for him to initiate. She rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. It was a kiss born of fear and anger, and a longing she had tried to bury. It was an admission of defeat and a declaration of war all at once. Dante went rigid for a split second, as if he could not believe she was touching him. Then he broke. A low sound rumbled in his throat. His arms wrapped around her, sweeping her off her balance and crushing her against him. He kissed her back with a desperate intensity, his mouth firm and hungry. He did not treat her like glass this time. He treated her like she was the air he needed to breathe. His hands slid down her back, pressing her body into the hard lines of his. He was solid, immovable, an anchor in the storm of her life. Olivia responded with equal urgency. Her hands slid up his chest to wrap around his neck, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. She pulled him closer, needing to feel every inch of him, needing to erase the distance she had tried so hard to keep. The kiss deepened, becoming a slow, consuming burn. It was not frantic, it was heavy. It was the feeling of sinking into warm water. Dante's lips moved against hers with a skill that made her head spin, tasting her, claiming her. He walked her backward until her legs hit the edge of the sofa, but he did not push her down. He just held her there, his body shielding her, his hands pressing into the small of her back as if he were trying to merge her very soul with his. They stood there for what felt like an eternity, bodies pressed close, clothes acting as a frustrating barrier that neither dared to remove yet. The intimacy was overwhelming. It was in the way their breath mingled, in the way his heart hammered against hers, in the way he groaned her name against her mouth. Dante broke the kiss first, but he did not go far. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, his breathing ragged. "Olivia!" he rasped. She kept her eyes closed, afraid that if she opened them, the spell would break. "I am here. You are the only thing," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. "The only thing that makes me wonder if I chose the wrong life. The only thing that makes me want to be better." Olivia opened her eyes. Dante was looking at her with a naked vulnerability that took her breath away. "Then be careful," she whispered, bringing her hand up to touch his face. "Be careful, Dante, because if you get yourself killed, I will never forgive you." Dante turned his face into her palm, kissing the center of her hand. "I will burn the whole city down if I have to," he promised, "but I will come back to you." He kissed her once more, softly, lingeringly, a promise sealed in the dark, and then he pulled away. The loss of his warmth was immediate and painful. "Lock the door behind me," he ordered gently. He walked out into the hallway. Olivia watched him go, her lips swollen, her heart racing, her entire world tilted on its axis. She locked the deadbolt with trembling hands. Outside, the street was dark. The rain had started again, washing the grime of Grey Ridge into the gutters. Dante walked to his car, his mind still in the apartment upstairs, his blood still humming with the memory of Olivia's touch. He felt invincible. He felt terrified. Down the block, sitting in a nondescript sedan with the engine off, Luca watched Dante get into his SUV. Luca's face was illuminated by the glow of his cell phone screen. His expression was tight, his mouth set in a grim line. He looked at the lit window on the third floor of the apartment building, Olivia's apartment. He dialed a number. It rang twice before a voice answered, deep, gravelly. "Do you have something for me?" the voice asked. It was Caldero. "Yeah," Luca said, his voice flat. "I know why he is distracted. I know why he is making mistakes. Tell me." "It is a woman," Luca said, his eyes fixed on Olivia's window. "A nurse. Olivia Harlow." There was a pause on the line, followed by a low, dark chuckle. "A nurse?" Caldero asked. "Varloni is losing a war over a nurse?" "She is his weakness," Luca confirmed. "He is obsessed. He just spent an hour in her apartment while his own men are waiting for orders. If you want to break him..." "She is the key." "Good work." "Luca," Caldero said, "you will get your money. Just make sure Dante does not see the knife coming." "I will," Luca said. He hung up the phone and watched as the light in Olivia's window finally went out. In the dark car, Luca told himself it was just business. He told himself Dante had lost his way. But as he put the car in gear and drove away into the rain, the bitter taste of betrayal filled his mouth. The reverberations of the explosion were felt before the sound actually registered. It was a low, terrestrial shudder that rattled the glass vials in the supply cabinet of Trauma Room 3. Moments later, the sirens began, a wailing, discordant chorus rising from the industrial district like a scream. Olivia Harlow stood at the nurse's station, her pen hovering over a chart. A cold dread, heavy and sickening, settled in her stomach. She knew, with an instinct honed by weeks of living in Dante Varlone's shadow, that this was not a gas leak. 10 minutes later, the first ambulance screeched into the bay. Mass casualty incident. The paramedic shouted as he burst through the double doors. Pushing a gurney, warehouse fire on the east side, secondary explosion. Olivia rushed forward to assist. Snapping on a pair of gloves, she looked down at the patient on the gurney and felt the world tilt on its axis. It was Sarah. Sarah, the triage nurse who had covered Olivia's breaks for 3 years. Sarah, who had a 3-year-old daughter and a laugh that echoed down the halls. Her face was gray with soot, her arm wrapped in a makeshift tourniquet that was soaked through with bright red blood. "Sarah?" Olivia gasped, her hands shaking as she reached for the trauma shears. "What happened?" She was walking to her car, the paramedic explained hurriedly as they transferred her to the bed. She parked a block away to save money. The blast wave threw her into a brick wall, shrapnel in the shoulder and leg. Olivia worked. She worked through the tears that blurred her vision, following the protocols, stopping the bleeding, stabilizing the friend who was moaning in pain. But as she cut away the ruined fabric of Sarah's scrubs, a fury unlike anything she had ever felt ignited in her chest. This was not just headlines anymore. This was not just gangsters shooting at each other in dark alleys. This was Sarah's blood on her hands. When Sarah was stable and moved to surgery, Olivia stripped off her gloves and threw them into the bin with a violence that startled the resident standing next to her. She walked out of the ER, ignoring the calls of her supervisor. She did not change out of her scrubs. She did not care who saw the bloodstains on her sleeve. She knew where Dante would be. The parking garage was a concrete cavern, dimly lit and smelling of gasoline and damp dust. It was neutral ground, a place where Dante often switched vehicles to avoid tracking. Olivia found him on the 4th level, standing next to the black sedan she had ridden in weeks ago. He was on the phone, his back to her. He was shouting, his voice echoing off the concrete pillars, filled with a terrifying rage. "Find them!" Dante roared into the device. "I do not care what it costs. Burn the whole block if you have to." He slammed the phone down on the hood of the car as Olivia approached. He turned, his hand instinctively going to the holster beneath his jacket before he recognized her. The relief that washed over his face was instantaneous, but it was quickly replaced by alarm when he saw the blood on her scrubs. "Olivia," he said, stepping forward, his hands reaching for her. "You are hurt. Do not touch me," she said. Her voice was low, trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and hatred. She stepped back, putting distance between them. Dante froze. He looked at her hands, then at her face. "It is not your blood," he realized. "No," Olivia spat. "It is Sarah's blood." "Do you know who Sarah is, Dante? She is a mother. She is a nurse. She was walking to her car when your warehouse exploded." Dante's jaw tightened. A muscle feathered in his cheek. He looked away, staring at the concrete floor. "I know about the explosion," he said quietly. Caldero hit a distribution center. It was empty, but the fuel tanks. "I do not care about your fuel tanks," Olivia screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. "I do not care about your distribution center. People are getting hurt. Dante, innocent people. People I love. I did not set the bomb." "Olivia," Dante said, his voice rising, defensive and sharp. "But you built the target," she countered, advancing on him. "You brought this into the city. You brought this to my doorstep. You told me you were protecting me, but all you have done is turn everyone around me into collateral damage." Dante stepped toward her, his expression hardening. "They targeted that warehouse because of me." "Yes, but they targeted your brother first. Do not forget that. I started this war to keep your family from being erased. My brother is alive because I begged you," she said. "But Sarah is in surgery because of you. Who is next? Dante? Who else has to bleed so you can keep your territory?" "It is not about territory," Dante shouted. He slammed his hand against the roof of the car, the sound like a gunshot in the empty garage. "It is about survival. You think if I stop..." Caldero stops. "You think if I walk away, he just lets everyone go? He will burn everything I ever touched, including you." "I do not want your protection if it costs this much," Olivia said, her voice breaking. She felt tears streaming down her face, hot and angry. I cannot do this. Dante, I cannot look at you and see anything but violence. I cannot be part of your world. Dante looked at her. The anger drained out of him, leaving him looking hollowed out. He looked at her as if she had physically struck him. Olivia, he whispered. No, she said, shaking her head. I am done. I am walking away. Do not follow me. Do not send your men to watch me. Just leave me alone. She turned to go. Walking away does not make you safe, Dante called out. His voice was devoid of emotion. It was cold, factual, and terrifying. Olivia stopped, her hand gripping the strap of her bag. Walking away from me will not make you invisible to them, he said. It will just make you alone. I would rather be alone than be with a monster, Olivia whispered. She did not look back. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and left him standing alone in the gray concrete silence. The ride home was a blur of neon lights and rain. Olivia sat on the bus, staring at her reflection in the dark window. She felt numb. She felt like she had cut off a limb to save the body, but the wound was still bleeding. She got off at her stop. The rain had picked up, turning the streets of her neighborhood into slick, shimmering mirrors. She kept her head down, walking fast. She wanted to get home, lock the heavy deadbolt Dante had installed, and scrub Sarah's blood off her skin. She turned the corner onto her street. It was quiet. Too quiet. Usually. There was a black sedan parked near the hydrant, Dante's sentries. Tonight, the spot was empty. A prickle of warning danced down her spine. Olivia slowed her pace. She reached into her bag, her fingers wrapping around her keys, positioning them between her knuckles as a makeshift weapon. She was 10 feet from the entrance of her building when the van screeched around the corner. It was gray, rusted, and moved with aggressive speed before Olivia could turn, before she could run. It slammed to a halt at the curb next to her. The side door slid open with a metallic crash. 2 men jumped out. They wore ski masks. Olivia screamed. She swung her bag, Arida, hitting the first man in the face, but he was heavy and expecting resistance. He grunted and grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back with brutal efficiency. "Let me go!" she shrieked. Kicking out, she connected with a shin, but the second man was already there. He grabbed her legs, lifting her off the ground. They threw her into the back of the van like a sack of laundry. Olivia scrambled backward, trying to get to the door, but the first man climbed in after her. He shoved her down, his knee pressing into the center of her back, pinning her to the filthy metal floor. "Stop fighting, bitch!" He growled. He grabbed her wrists. She felt the bite of plastic zip ties cinching tight, biting into her skin. "Help!" Olivia screamed, hoping a neighbor would hear, hoping the sentries were just around the corner. The man slapped a piece of duct tape over her mouth, sealing her scream inside her throat. The door slammed shut, plunging the van into darkness. The engine roared, and Olivia felt the lurch of acceleration. She was thrown against the wheel well, her shoulder hitting the metal hard. Tears of frustration and terror pricked her eyes. She lay there in the dark, smelling stale cigarettes and fear, and the only thought that ran through her mind was the cold, haunting echo of Dante's voice in the parking garage. "It will just make you alone." Dante was still in the parking garage, sitting in the driver's seat of his car, staring at nothing. When his phone rang, it was Marco. "Boss," Marco said, his voice breathless. "The sentries. They are gone. We found the car abandoned 2 blocks from the girl's apartment. The tires were slashed." Dante felt his blood turn to ice. "Where is she?" Dante demanded, starting the engine. Marco hesitated. "Neighbors reported a van, a gray Econoline. They said they saw a woman being taken." Dante did not say a word. He threw the phone onto the passenger seat and floored the accelerator. The tires smoked as he tore out of the garage, drifting onto the main road. He drove with the reckless precision of a man who had nothing left to lose. He tore through red lights, weaving through traffic. His mind was a white-hot singularity of rage. He dialed Luca. Luca picked up on the second ring. "Dante? Where are you?" Dante asked. His voice was calm, unnaturally calm. "I am at the warehouse on 5th, overseeing the cleanup," Luca said. "Why? What is happening? Stay there, Dante said. I am coming to you. He hung up. He knew. In his gut, he knew. The sentries had been pulled or neutralized. Only someone on the inside knew the rotation. Only someone on the inside knew exactly when Dante would be distracted by an argument he had told no one about. 10 minutes later, Dante kicked open the door of the office at the 5th Street warehouse. Luca was sitting at the desk, counting cash. He looked up, startled by the intrusion. Dante. What is... Dante crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed Luca by the lapels of his jacket and slammed him against the wall. A framed picture shattered on the floor. Where is she? Dante snarled, his face inches from his lieutenant's. I do not know what you are talking about, Luca stammered, his eyes wide with feigned confusion. Do not lie to me, Dante roared. He pulled his gun from his holster and pressed the barrel under Luca's chin. The metal clinked against Luca's jawbone. The sentries were gone. Luca, you managed the schedule. You moved them. Where did Caldero take her? Luca stared at him, sweat beading on his forehead. He saw the look in Dante's eyes. It was not the look of a businessman. It was the look of a butcher. He offered me 50,000, Luca whispered, his voice trembling. He said he just wanted to talk to her. To scare you. Dante pistol-whipped him. The sound was a wet crack. Luca crumpled to the floor, clutching his bleeding nose. Where is she? Dante screamed, aiming the gun at Luca's kneecap. The shipping yard, Luca shrieked, curling into a ball. The old one by the river. Pier 9. He's holding her in the foreman's office. Dante lowered the gun. He looked at the man he had trusted for 10 years, the man who had sold Olivia's life for $50,000. You are done, Dante said coldly. Get out of my city. If I see you again, I will not ask questions. I will just shoot. He turned and walked out, leaving Luca bleeding on the floor. He pulled out his phone and dialed Marco. Gather the men, Dante ordered. Not the payroll crew. Just the ones who would die for me. We are going to the shipping yard, and we are going to kill everyone who stands in our way. The shipping yard was a graveyard of rusted metal and rotting wood. The wind howled off the river, whistling through the gaps in the stacked shipping containers. In the center of the yard stood a corrugated metal building, the old foreman's office. Inside, it was drafty and smelled of mold. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swaying in the draft, casting long, swinging shadows. Olivia sat in a wooden chair in the center of the room. Her wrists were zip-tied behind her back. Her ankles were taped to the chair legs. Her scrub top was torn at the shoulder, and her cheek was bruising where she had been struck in the van. But her head was up. In front of her, leaning against a rusted filing cabinet, was Hector Caldero. He was shorter than Dante, thicker, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He wore a suit that was too shiny and rings on every finger. He's not coming, you know, Caldero said. He lit a cigar, blowing the smoke in Olivia's direction. He will come, Olivia said. Her voice was raspy, her throat dry, but she refused to let it waver. For a nurse? Caldero laughed. He walked around her, inspecting her like cattle. Dante Varloni is a businessman. He calculates risk. Coming here. Into my territory. Against my men. That is bad math. He knows when to cut his losses. You do not know him, Olivia said. And you do? Caldero sneered. He leaned in close. His face was unnervingly close to hers. She could smell the stale tobacco and the mint of his breath. You are just a weakness, sweetheart, a soft spot, and tonight I am going to cut that soft spot out. He reached out and trailed a finger down her cheek. Olivia recoiled, jerking her head away. Do not touch me, she hissed. Caldero grabbed her chin, his fingers digging into her jaw, forcing her to look at him. You have fire, he mused. I see why he likes you. It will be a shame to put that fire out. But I have to send a message. I have to show the city what happens when you stand next to Dante Varlone. He let go of her face with a shove. I am going to let you sit here for a while, Caldero said, walking toward the door. Think about your choices. Think about the man who left you here to die. He walked out, slamming the heavy metal door. The lock clicked. Olivia was alone. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. She thought of Noah. She thought of Sarah. She thought of Dante. He will come, she told herself. He promised, but she could not just wait. She was not a damsel in a storybook. She was an ER nurse. She dealt with crisis for a living. She tested the zip ties. They were tight, biting into her wrists, but the plastic was cheap. She looked around the room, the filing cabinet, the desk, the chair she was sitting on. She shifted her weight, rocking the chair. It was heavy. Old wood. She rocked harder, throwing her weight to the side. With a crash, she tipped the chair over. She hit the concrete floor hard, her shoulder taking the brunt of the impact. Pain shot through her arm, but she ignored it. She lay on her side, breathing heavily. She scooted backward, dragging the chair with her, until her bound hands found a shard of metal sticking out from the rusted base of the desk. It was jagged. It was sharp. Olivia gritted her teeth. She positioned the plastic of the zip tie against the shard. It was awkward. She had to twist her wrists at a painful angle. She began to saw. The metal bit into her skin. She felt the warm trickle of blood running down her palm. But she kept sawing. Back and forth, back and forth. Suddenly, outside, the night exploded. Pop, 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 gunfire. It was distant at first, then closer. Shouting, the sound of metal on metal. Olivia's heart leaped. He was here. She sawed harder, ignoring the pain in her wrists. The door to the office burst open. Caldero rushed in, looking flustered. He had a gun in his hand. "He is actually here," Caldero muttered. Looking out the cracked window, the crazy bastard actually came. He turned to look at Olivia lying on the floor. His eyes narrowed. "Get up," he ordered. He walked toward her. Olivia felt the zip tie snap. Her hands were free. She kept them behind her back, feigning captivity. She waited. Her heart was a drum in her ears. Caldero reached down to grab her arm, to haul her up. Now! Olivia pulled her right hand free. She grabbed the leg of the heavy wooden chair she was still taped to. With a scream of effort, she swung the chair leg upward with every ounce of strength she possessed. It connected solidly with Caldero's knee. There was a sickening crunch. Caldero howled in pain, buckling instantly. He dropped to one knee, the gun slipping from his fingers and skittering across the floor. "You bitch!" he screamed, reaching for her. Olivia scrambled backward, kicking at him with her taped feet. The door flew open again. Dante stood in the frame. He looked like a nightmare. His coat was gone. His white shirt was stained with dirt and blood. He held a gun in each hand. His eyes were wild, scanning the room until they landed on her. The fear and fury in his expression was terrifying to behold. He looked at Caldero on the ground, then at Olivia on the floor with her bloody wrists. Dante stepped into the room. "Do not move," he said to Caldero. The voice was not human. It was the sound of death itself. Dante looked at Olivia. "Are you okay? I am free," she gasped, holding up her bleeding hands. Dante nodded. He looked back at Caldero. "You touched her," Dante whispered. He raised the gun. The silence in the warehouse office lasted only a heartbeat, fragile and deceptive. Dante stood with the gun raised, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on Hector Caldero, who was sprawled on the floor, clutching his shattered knee. In that split second, Olivia saw the hesitation in Dante. It was not weakness. It was the pause of a man who was trying to decide if he was still an executioner or if he was the man who had held her in her living room and promised to be better. That hesitation cost him. Caldero, driven by the feral desperation of a cornered animal, roared and launched himself upward. He ignored the ruin of his leg, driving his shoulder into Dante's midsection with the force of a battering ram. Dante, exhausted from the gauntlet he had fought through in the shipping yard, stumbled back. The gun fired, the shot going wide and punching a hole in the corrugated metal ceiling. The weapon flew from his hand, skidding across the oil-stained concrete floor, spinning into the shadows near the overturned desk. Dante and Caldero crashed into the wall, a tangle of limbs and fury. The impact shook the room. A framed map of the city fell, glass shattering around them. Olivia pressed herself against the filing cabinet, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She watched with a sickening mix of horror and helpless devotion. This was not a choreographed fight from a movie. It was ugly, brutal, and terrifyingly real. Caldero was fighting for his life, clawing at Dante's face, trying to gouge his eyes. Dante was fighting for hers. He absorbed a heavy blow to his jaw that snapped his head back, spraying blood from a cut on his lip, but he did not fall. He grabbed Caldero by the lapels of his suit and slammed him backward into the metal lockers, the sound echoing like a gong. "Stay down," Dante shouted, his voice ragged. Caldero laughed, a wet, gurgling sound, and drove a fist into Dante's injured ribs. "You cannot kill me, Varlone! You do not have the stomach for it anymore! You went soft!" Dante grimaced in pain, his grip faltering. Caldero shoved him away and scrambled toward the gun. "No!" Olivia screamed. She was still taped to the chair by her ankles, though the wood had splintered when she smashed it into Caldero's knee. She dragged herself forward, ignoring the shards of glass biting into her palms. Caldero's fingers were inches from the weapon. He looked up, his eyes meeting Olivia's, a triumphant sneer curling his lip. Dante was too far away. He was struggling to regain his footing, his breath coming in wheezing gasps. Olivia remembered the training drills in the ER. Assess. React. Do not think. She did not think. She lunged, using her arms to pivot her weight. She swung her bound legs with everything she had left. Her heavy work shoe connected with the barrel of the gun just as Caldero's fingertips brushed the metal. The gun skittered away, sliding 10 feet across the smooth concrete, directly toward Dante. Caldero let out a howl of rage and turned to grab Olivia, his hand reaching for her throat, but it was too late. Dante dove. He hit the floor, sliding on his stomach, his hand closing around the grip of the pistol. He rolled onto his back in one fluid motion, the weapon rising. There was no hesitation this time, no pause for morality. There was only the threat to the woman he loved. Dante pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening in the small space. Caldero jerked violently, then collapsed backward. He did not move again. The reign of the Caldero crime family ended not with a grand war, but with a single, decisive crack of thunder in a dusty office. Silence rushed back into the room, heavy and ringing. Olivia lay on the floor, panting, staring at the motionless figure of the man who had threatened to break her. She felt cold. She felt sick. Dante scrambled to his feet. He did not look at Caldero. He dropped the gun as if it were burning hot and rushed to Olivia. He fell to his knees beside her, his hands trembling violently as they hovered over her, afraid to touch, afraid of what he might find. "Olivia," he breathed, his voice broken. "Olivia." He pulled a knife from his boot, a backup weapon he had not had time to use, and sliced through the duct tape binding her ankles. He threw the tape aside and holstered the knife, his hands immediately returning to her. He cupped her face, his palms smearing a mixture of dirt and his own blood onto her skin. But Olivia did not care. She leaned into his touch, a sob breaking loose from her throat. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his eyes frantically scanning her body. "Did he cut you? Did he—" "I'm okay," she sobbed, grabbing his wrists, anchoring him to her. "I am okay. You came. You actually came. I thought I lost you," Dante whispered. The steel was gone from his voice. The command was gone. There was only a terrifying vulnerability. "I thought I was too late." He pulled her up, dragging her into his arms. Olivia collided with his chest, wrapping her arms around his neck, burying her face in the curve of his shoulder. She clung to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was dissolving. She could feel the tremors running through his massive frame. She could feel the wetness of his blood soaking into her scrub top. He held her so tightly it almost hurt, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pressing her spine against him, shielding her from the sight of the body on the floor. "Nothing matters," he murmured into her hair, rocking her slightly. "Nothing I own, nothing I built, none of it matters if you are not here." Olivia pulled back just enough to look at him. His face was battered, his lip was split, his eye swelling shut, blood running down his temple. But his eyes were clear, dark, and filled with a love so intense it frightened her. She reached up, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw, wiping away a streak of grime. "We are alive," she whispered. Dante looked at her mouth. He made a low, desperate sound in his throat and crushed his lips to hers. This kiss was not like the others. It was not tentative or seductive. It was a collision of souls. It was frantic, messy, and deeply necessary. It tasted of salt and iron and survival. Olivia opened to him, pouring every ounce of her relief and her fear into the kiss, her fingers digging into his shoulders, pulling him closer, needing to feel the heat of his life against hers. Dante groaned, his hands cradling her skull, tilting her head back to deepen the contact. It was a confession. It was a vow. In the darkness of that warehouse, amidst the wreckage of violence, they claimed each other completely. Then, the sound of the world pierced their bubble. Sirens, they were distant but growing louder, a lot of them. The gunfire had drawn the entire precinct. Dante broke the kiss, pulling away breathless. He looked toward the door, his expression hardening instantly. "We have to go," he said. He stood up and pulled Olivia to her feet. He grabbed his phone from his pocket. The screen cracked. "Marco." He barked into the phone. "The police are 2 minutes out. Scatter the boys. Do not get caught. The war is over. Caldero is finished." He hung up without waiting for a response. Looked at Olivia. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" Olivia asked, stumbling as he led her toward the back exit of the office. "Away from the main yard. My car is parked on the service road," he said. "We have maybe 3 minutes before they lock down the perimeter." They ran. They burst out into the cool night air, the rain hitting their faces. They sprinted through the maze of rusted shipping containers, their footsteps splashing in the puddles. Olivia's lungs burned, her legs screaming in protest, but she did not stop. She held Dante's hand, letting him pull her through the darkness. They reached the black sedan just as the first blue and red lights flashed against the sky near the main gate. Dante shoved her into the passenger seat and vaulted into the driver's side. He started the engine, leaving the headlights off, and guided the car down a narrow, overgrown dirt track that led away from the river. They drove in silence for 10 minutes, putting distance between themselves and the sirens. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a crushing reality. Dante pulled the car over onto a quiet side street in the industrial district, under the cover of an old bridge. He killed the engine. He did not look at her immediately. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "I have a plan," he said. His voice was quiet. "What kind of plan?" Olivia asked. She was shivering now, the shock setting in. Dante turned to her. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a thick black duffel bag. He unzipped it slightly, revealing stacks of cash and 2 passports. "I have accounts offshore," he said. "Cayman Islands, Switzerland. They are clean, untraceable. I have an apartment in a town 3 states away, leased under the name David Vance." He looked at her, his eyes intense. "If I stay, I go to prison," he said. "There is no buying my way out of this one. Too many bodies. Too much noise. Or a rival steps up to fill the vacuum. Caldero left, and the war starts all over again." He took a deep breath. "I am leaving. Olivia, tonight. I am draining the accounts and disappearing. The Varloni syndicate dies tonight." Olivia stared at him. "You are leaving everything? The power, the money, the city? It is just blood money," he said, looking at his hands. "It never bought me anything that mattered. It certainly never bought me peace." He reached out and took her hand. His grip was loose, giving her the choice to pull away. "I want you to come with me," he said. The request hung in the air, heavy and terrified. "I cannot promise you it will be easy," Dante continued, his voice rough. "I cannot promise that the nightmares will go away, but I can promise you that I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to be the man you deserve. I will never touch a gun again. I will never hurt anyone again." Olivia looked at the passport in the bag. She looked at the rain streaking the windshield. She thought about the hospital. She thought about her apartment with the peeling paint. She thought about Sarah, recovering in the ICU. If she stayed, she could go back to her life. She could tell the police she was kidnapped. She could be the victim. She could go back to double shifts and lonely nights and the constant, gnawing feeling that she was just surviving, not living. But then she looked at Dante. She saw the man who had stood between her and a gang of drunks. She saw the man who had cleared her brother's debt without asking for a thank you. She saw the man who had just walked into a death trap because he could not bear the thought of a world without her. He was a criminal, He had done terrible things, but he was also the man who had looked at her in a dark alley and seen her bravery, not her fear. "Olivia," Dante whispered, misinterpreting her silence. "You do not have to come. If you want to stay, I have enough cash here to set you up. You can finish nursing school. You can help your brother. You can be free of me." He started to reach for the cash, to give it to her. Olivia stopped his hand. She intertwined her fingers with his, pressing her palm against his battered knuckles. "I do not want the money," she said softly. Dante froze. "I cannot excuse what you have done. Dante," she said, looking him in the eye, "I cannot pretend the blood isn't there, and I will not let you pretend either. If we do this, we carry the weight of it." "I know," he said hoarsely. "But," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "I believe you. I believe you want to change, and I do not want you to try to walk that road alone." "You are coming?" he asked, hope flaring in his eyes like a beacon. "I am coming," she said. Dante let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He leaned across the console and kissed her forehead, a gesture of reverence. "Thank you," he whispered against her skin. "Drive." "David," she said, "using the name on the passport, let's get out of here." Dante put the car in gear. He did not look back at the skyline of Grey Ridge as it faded into the rearview mirror. He only looked at the road ahead and at the woman sitting beside him. 2 years later, the air in the town of Oakhaven smelled of salt and pine. It was a small coastal town in the Pacific Northwest, where the mist clung to the trees in the morning and the ocean crashed against the rocky cliffs with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. Olivia locked the door of the community clinic. She turned the sign to closed. "Good night, Olivia," the receptionist called out from her car. "Good night, Brenda." Olivia waved. She pulled her coat tighter around her. The autumn wind was brisk. She walked down the cobblestone street, past the bakery and the small hardware store. Her life here was quiet. She treated fishermen with hooks in their hands and children with scraped knees. There were no gunshot wounds. There were no midnight surgeries. She walked toward the pier. At the end of the wooden boardwalk, a man was waiting. He was wearing a thick wool sweater and jeans. His hair was longer now, softer, no longer slicked back in the severe style of a Don. He was leaning against the railing, watching the fishing boats bob in the harbor. Dante turned as he heard her footsteps. He smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. The lines of stress that used to map his face had softened, though the shadow of his past would never fully leave him. He ran a small security consulting firm now. He helped local businesses install alarm systems. He taught self-defense classes at the community center. He lived simply. "Hey," he said softly as she reached him. "Hey, yourself," Olivia replied. He reached out and pulled her into his side. His arm slipped around her waist, familiar and solid. Olivia leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. They fit together perfectly, two jagged pieces that had smoothed each other's edges. "How was work?" he asked. Kissing the top of her head. "Busy," she said. "Old mister. Henderson refuses to take his blood pressure medication again." Dante chuckled. "I will go have a talk with him. I will use my serious voice. Do not scare him," Olivia warned. "Poking him in the ribs, I would never," Dante promised. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the water in shades of violet and gold. The lighthouse in the distance began its slow, rhythmic rotation. "Do you miss it?" Olivia asked suddenly. She did not have to specify what it was. Dante looked out at the water. He tightened his arm around her. "I miss the Italian food," he admitted. "But that is it." He turned to look at her. He lifted his hand and brushed a strand of hair from her face, the same gesture he had used that night in her apartment, the night everything changed. "I have everything I want right here," he said. Olivia smiled. She reached up and placed her hand over his heart. It beat steady and calm beneath her palm. They were scarred. They both had nightmares sometimes. They both looked over their shoulders when a car backfired. The darkness of Grey Ridge was a part of them, a ghost that walked in their shadow. But as Dante lowered his head to kiss her, a slow, lingering kiss tasted of sea salt and hope. Olivia knew they had built something real. They had survived the alley. They had survived the war. And now, under the vast, open sky, they were finally learning how to survive the peace, together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Dante and Olivia as much as I enjoyed writing it. It is a tale about finding light in the darkest of places and the power of second chances. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you want to hear more stories like this, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories. Don't forget to share your thoughts on the ending in the English comments section. Did Olivia make the right choice? I look forward to reading your opinions.